Simone's hands trembled as she stared at the man she thought she knew, standing in the marble foyer of a Pacific Heights mansion that could house 50 families. Jin, her Jin, who worried about affording groceries and wore the same 3 oil-stained shirts, was speaking rapid Korean into a gold-plated phone, his voice carrying an authority that made her blood run cold. "The shipment from Busan arrives tomorrow. Make sure the dock workers understand the consequences of being late," he said, ending the call with the casual confidence of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. When he turned and saw her frozen in the doorway, still wearing her CNA scrubs from her double shift, his face cracked with something that looked like pain. "Simone, I can explain—" "Explain what?" Her voice broke. "That everything was a lie. That while I've been killing myself working 2 jobs to pay for nursing school, you've been—" "What exactly are you, Jin?" His jaw tightened, and for the first time since she'd known him, she saw the dangerous man he really was. Someone who never meant to fall in love. Welcome to Korean Mafia Lovers. Hey everyone, please let us know where you're watching from in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Your support is essential for us to keep creating these intense emotional stories. 3 months earlier, Simone Carter had been convinced that her 15-year-old Honda Civic was finally ready to give up the ghost. The engine made sounds that no car should ever make, and the transmission slipped every time she tried to accelerate up San Francisco's notorious hills. She pulled into Park's Auto Repair in the Mission District with a prayer and her last $100, hoping against hope that whatever was wrong wouldn't cost more than she could afford. The shop sat wedged between a taqueria and a laundromat, its weathered sign barely visible through the fog rolling in from the bay. The bell above the door chimed as she entered, and she was immediately hit with the familiar smell of motor oil and metal. Behind the counter stood a man who made her forget why she'd come in the first place. He was Korean, probably in his early 30s, with dark hair that looked like he'd run his hands through it, and the kind of face that belonged in magazines rather than under the hood of a car. But it was his eyes that caught her, intelligent, intense, and currently focused entirely on her, with an attention that made her pulse quicken. "Can I help you?" His voice was deeper than she'd expected, with just a hint of an accent that made her stomach flutter. Simone found her voice. "My car is making this horrible grinding noise, and I'm pretty sure it's about to die on me. I really can't afford for that to happen." He smiled, and she felt something shift in her chest. "Let's take a look. I'm Jin, by the way, Jin Park." "Simone Carter." She shook his hand, noting the calluses and the surprising gentleness in his grip. For the next hour, she watched him work on her car with a precision that seemed almost artistic. His hands moved with confidence as he diagnosed the problem, explaining everything in terms she could understand without talking down to her. "Your transmission fluid is completely shot, and you need new brake pads," he said, wiping his hands on a rag that had seen better days. "But the good news is I can fix it for about $60 in parts if you don't mind me using some refurbished components." Simone blinked. $60? Are you sure? The last place I went quoted me $400. Jin shrugged, his expression darkening slightly. "They were trying to rip you off. I don't believe in charging people more than they can afford, especially when—" He gestured toward her scrubs. "You're clearly doing important work." "I'm still in school, actually. Nursing program at UCSF." She felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Working as a CNA at SF General while I finish my degree. That's impressive. Long hours?" "Very long. I work nights at the hospital. Go to class during the day and pick up shifts at a diner in the Castro on weekends." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Sleep is more of a suggestion than a requirement these days. Something shifted in Jin's expression, a softness that hadn't been there before mixed with what looked almost like anger. "Well, let me get your car fixed so you can get home and get some of that sleep." As he worked, they talked. She learned that he'd grown up in the neighborhood, that he'd inherited the shop from the previous owner, and that he had a habit of staying late to help customers who couldn't afford to be without their cars for long. "You don't have to do that," Simone said as she watched him install the brake pads with practiced efficiency. "Do what?" "Stay late for people like me. I'm sure you have better things to do." Jin looked up from under the hood, his expression suddenly serious. "People like you. You know what I mean. People who can barely afford to keep their cars running." He straightened, and for a moment she saw something flash in his eyes, something that looked almost dangerous before it was replaced by warmth. "Simone, there's nothing more important than making sure you can get to work safely. Your patients need you." The sincerity in his voice made her chest tight. When was the last time someone had talked about her work like it mattered? "There," he said, closing the hood. "Try starting her up." The engine turned over smoothly, purring like it hadn't in months. Simone stared at him in amazement. "How did you—" "Magic," he said with a grin that made her stomach flip. As she paid him, their fingers brushed when he handed her the receipt. The contact lasted a second longer than necessary, and she saw something flicker in his eyes, something that made her breath catch. "Jin," she said as she reached the door. "Thank you. Really. Any time, Simone. And I mean that." Over the next few weeks, her car seemed to develop a series of minor issues that required Jin's attention. A loose belt here, a strange noise there. Nothing major, but enough to bring her back to the shop. She told herself it was just bad luck, but deep down, she knew she was looking for excuses to see him. Jin never seemed to mind. In fact, he always greeted her with that same warm smile. And their conversations grew longer each time. She learned that he was passionate about classic cars, that he sent money to his grandmother in Korea, and that he had a habit of fixing neighborhood kids' bikes for free. "You're too generous," she told him one evening, as she watched him refuse payment from an elderly woman whose car he'd spent 3 hours repairing. "My grandmother always said that kindness is the only currency that multiplies when you spend it," he replied, his accent more pronounced when he talked about his family. It was during her 4th visit that things changed. Simone had been running on 3 hours of sleep after pulling a double shift, and as she got out of her car, her legs gave out. Jin caught her before she hit the concrete, his arms strong and sure around her waist. "When was the last time you ate?" he asked, his face inches from hers. This morning, I think." His jaw tightened. "That's not acceptable. Come on." Before she could protest, he was leading her to the small office behind the shop, where he pulled out a container of homemade kimchi fried rice. "You made this?" she asked, accepting the fork he offered. "Cooking relaxes me," he said, watching as she took a bite. "My grandmother's recipe." The food was incredible, complex flavors that made her realize how much she'd been surviving on vending machine snacks and cafeteria food. "This is amazing," she said, and meant it. Jin smiled, but there was something almost sad in his expression. "I'm glad you like it." As she ate, she found herself really looking at him for the first time. His clothes might be simple, but they fit him perfectly. His hands might be calloused, but his nails were meticulously clean. And there was something about the way he carried himself, a confidence that seemed at odds with his humble surroundings. "Jin," she said carefully, "can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Why are you really here? In this neighborhood, I mean. You could probably work anywhere." For a moment, something flickered across his face, something that looked almost like panic before it was replaced by that familiar warmth. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "the place you end up isn't the place you planned to be, but that doesn't mean it's not exactly where you need to be." 2 weeks later, Simone found herself looking forward to her car troubles more than she cared to admit. What had started as legitimate mechanical issues had evolved into increasingly creative excuses to spend time at Jin's shop. Today's excuse was a mysterious rattling sound that only seemed to happen when she was driving alone. "I don't hear anything," Jin said, popping the hood with an amused smile that told her he knew exactly what she was doing. "It's very subtle," Simone insisted, trying to keep a straight face, almost like a metallic whisper. "A metallic whisper?" Jin's eyebrows shot up. "That's a new one." She was saved from further embarrassment by the arrival of 3 men who clearly didn't belong in the neighborhood. They wore expensive suits despite the Mission District's casual atmosphere, and there was something about their posture that made Simone's nursing instincts kick in, the same way she could spot trouble in the ER before it fully manifested. Jin's entire demeanor changed the moment he saw them. The easy warmth disappeared, replaced by something harder, more alert. He moved subtly, positioning himself between Simone and the newcomers. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying a note of authority she'd never heard before, "the shop is closed for lunch." The tallest of the 3, a man with silver hair and cold eyes, smiled without warmth. "We're not here for car repairs, Park. We need to discuss the Nakamura situation." "I told you I'm out of that business," Jin replied, his accent suddenly less pronounced, his English more precise. "Nobody gets out and you know it. My father is dead." Jin cut him off, and Simone felt a chill run down her spine at the ice in his voice. "And I'm not him." The man's smile widened. "No, you're not. You're softer, more sentimental." His gaze flicked to Simone, and she felt like prey being evaluated by a predator. "That's dangerous in our line of work." Jin stepped forward, and suddenly the gentle mechanic was gone entirely. In his place stood someone who radiated danger like heat from a forge. "Are you threatening me, Yamamoto?" "I'm reminding you of your obligations. The meeting is tomorrow night. Don't make us come looking for you." The three men left as abruptly as they'd arrived, but the tension in the air remained thick enough to cut. Jin stood frozen for a long moment, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "Jin." Simone's voice was barely a whisper. "Who were those men?" He turned to her, and for a split second she saw something raw and dangerous in his eyes before he forced his familiar smile back into place. But it didn't reach his eyes this time. Nobody important. Just some guys from the old neighborhood who can't accept that people change. But Simone had spent 2 years working in an emergency room. She knew when someone was lying, and she knew when someone was scared. Jin was both. "You don't have to pretend with me," she said softly. "Whatever's going on, maybe I can help." Jin's laugh was bitter. "You can't help with this, Simone, trust me. Try me. I've seen a lot of things working at the hospital, gang violence, drug overdoses, domestic abuse." "This isn't gang violence," Jin interrupted, then seemed to realize what he'd revealed. "I mean, it's nothing like that. Just old business associates who don't understand boundaries." The lie sat between them like a wall, and Simone felt something precious beginning to crack. She'd thought they were building something real, something honest. But how could it be honest when he was clearly hiding something huge? "I should go," she said, reaching for her keys. "Simone, wait." Jin caught her hand, and the contact sent electricity up her arm. "I know this looks bad, but I can't. There are things about my past that I'm not proud of, things I'm trying to leave behind." She looked down at their joined hands. His were trembling slightly, and that small sign of vulnerability made her heart ache. "We all have pasts, Jin, but whatever yours is, it doesn't change who you are now." He lifted their joined hands to his lips, pressing a soft kiss to her knuckles. The gesture was so tender, so reverent, that it made her breath catch. "You don't know what you're saying," he whispered against her skin. "Then tell me, help me understand." For a moment, she thought he might. His eyes searched her face like he was memorizing it, and she saw a war being fought behind his dark gaze. But then he stepped back, releasing her hand. "I can't. Not yet. But Simone." He reached up to cup her face, his thumb brushing across her cheek. "Whatever happens, I need you to know that meeting you has been the best thing that's happened to me in years. You make me want to be the man you think I am." The intensity in his voice, the raw honesty of it, made her knees weak. Before she could think better of it, she rose on her tiptoes and kissed him. It was supposed to be soft, reassuring, but the moment their lips met, something ignited between them. Jin's arms came around her, pulling her against him as he deepened the kiss with a desperation that spoke of months of restraint finally breaking. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Jin rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. "You're going to be the death of me, Simone Carter," he whispered. "Good thing I'm studying to be a nurse then," she replied, trying to lighten the moment. "I can keep you alive." He smiled, but there was sadness in it. "I hope so." That night, Simone couldn't concentrate on her studies. Every time she tried to focus on her pharmacology textbook, she found herself thinking about the way Jin had looked at those men. The authority in his voice, the fear she'd glimpsed in his eyes. She'd grown up in Oakland, had seen enough of street life to recognize the signs. Jin was involved in something dangerous, something that went far beyond old neighborhood disputes. But the man who'd kissed her with such desperate tenderness, who fixed cars for free and worried about her eating enough, that man was real too. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Jin. I know it's late, but I wanted to make sure you got home safely." She stared at the message for a long moment before typing back. "How did you get my number?" "I may have looked at your intake form when you weren't paying attention. I'm sorry if that's crossing a line." Despite everything, she found herself smiling. "It's crossing a line, but I'm glad you did. Can I see you tomorrow, not at the shop, somewhere neutral? Her heart raced. Like a date? Like a conversation? There are things I want to tell you, things I should have told you already. Simone stared at the message for a long time. Every rational part of her brain was screaming warnings, but her heart was louder. Golden Gate Park, the Japanese tea garden, 2 p.m. I'll be there, and Simone, thank you for giving me a chance to explain. As she set her phone aside and tried once again to focus on her studies, Simone couldn't shake the feeling that tomorrow would change everything. She just hoped it would be for the better. Outside her apartment window, a black sedan sat in the shadows, its occupants watching and waiting. The Japanese tea garden was crowded with tourists, which made Simone feel safer as she waited by the moon bridge. She'd arrived early, partly from nerves and partly because she'd wanted to scope out the location. 2 years of working night shifts in the ER had taught her to always have an exit strategy. Jin appeared exactly at 2 p.m., but he looked different. Gone were the oil-stained work clothes, replaced by dark jeans and a black button-down shirt that probably cost more than she made in a week. His hair was styled differently too, swept back in a way that emphasized the sharp angles of his face. "You look," she started, then stopped, unsure how to finish. "Different," he supplied, his smile rueful. "This is closer to who I really am." They walked in silence for a few minutes, the sound of tourists and flowing water filling the space between them. Finally, Jin led her to a secluded bench overlooking a koi pond. "My real name is Min-jun Park," he began, his voice quiet but clear. "Jin is what my American friends called me in college, and it stuck. I was born in Seoul, but my family moved here when I was 12. Simone waited, sensing there was much more to come. "My father was involved in certain business ventures, import-export mostly, but not always the legal kind. He built an empire here in San Francisco, and when he died 3 years ago, that empire became my responsibility." The pieces were starting to click into place, and Simone felt her stomach drop. "What kind of empire?" Jin was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "The kind that operates in the shadows, the kind that has more power than most people realize, and more reach than the law can touch." "You're talking about organized crime," she said, the words feeling foreign in her mouth. "I'm talking about family obligation, about honor and duty and traditions that go back generations." He turned to look at her, and she saw pain in his dark eyes. "I'm talking about a life I never wanted but couldn't escape." Simone's mind was reeling. The gentle mechanic who worried about her eating enough, who fixed cars for free and sent money to his grandmother. He was a criminal. "The auto shop," she said slowly. "That's not real." "It's real. I bought it 2 years ago when I was trying to find myself, I guess. I thought maybe if I could live a normal life, be a normal person, I could find a way out." His laugh was bitter. "Turns out you can't run from blood. Those men yesterday, associates of my father's, they want me to take over completely, to stop playing at being ordinary." Jin's hands clenched into fists. "There's a meeting tomorrow night, a gathering of the families to discuss territory and other business. They expect me to attend." Simone felt like the world was tilting off its axis. "And will you?" "I don't have a choice. If I don't show, they'll see it as weakness, and weak leaders don't last long in my world." They sat in silence, watching the koi swim in lazy circles. Simone's mind was racing, trying to reconcile the man she'd fallen for with this revelation. But as she studied his profile, she realized that the signs had been there all along. The way he carried himself, the expensive watch he sometimes forgot to take off, the fact that he never seemed to worry about money despite running a small auto shop. "Is any of it real?" she asked finally. "The way you are with me, the things you've told me about yourself." Jin turned to face her fully, reaching for her hands. She let him take them, noting again the calluses that were real, the gentleness that couldn't be faked. "Everything I've told you about my feelings is real. The way I am with you. That's the most real I've ever been in my life." His voice cracked slightly. "You make me remember who I wanted to be before the world told me who I had to be. But you lied to me. About everything. I protected you," he said fiercely. "Do you know what would happen if my enemies knew about you? If they knew that there was someone I cared about more than the business?" The possessiveness in his voice should have scared her. Instead, it sent a thrill through her that she didn't want to examine too closely. "So what happens now?" she asked. "Now you walk away. You forget you ever met me and you go back to your life. You finish nursing school, you save lives, and you find someone who can give you the normal, safe life you deserve. And what if I don't want normal and safe? Jin's grip on her hands tightened. Simone, you don't understand what you're saying. My world is dangerous. People get hurt. People die. People die in my world too, she said quietly. I see it every night at the hospital. The difference is, in your world, you have the power to protect the people you care about. Something flickered in Jin's eyes. Hope, maybe, or fear. You're talking about staying, about being part of this. I'm talking about not walking away from something real just because it's complicated. Before Jin could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his face went pale. What is it? Simone asked. We need to leave, now. Jin was already standing, his hand on her elbow. Someone's been watching us. As they hurried through the garden, Simone caught glimpses of men in dark suits, who seemed to be moving with purpose through the crowds. Her heart was pounding, but it wasn't entirely from fear. There was something exhilarating about the danger, about the way Jin's protective instincts had kicked in. They made it to Jin's car, not the beat-up Honda she'd expected, but a sleek black BMW that purred to life with expensive precision. Where are we going? She asked as Jin pulled into traffic with the skill of someone who'd done this before. Somewhere safe. I have a place in Pacific Heights. The drive took 20 minutes, winding through increasingly affluent neighborhoods until they reached a street lined with mansions that looked like they belonged in a magazine. Jin pulled into the driveway of a modern glass and steel house that probably cost more than most people made in a lifetime. This is your place? Simone asked, staring up at the imposing structure. One of them, Jin said, and she heard the shame in his voice. I know how this looks. I know what you must be thinking. No. But as they walked through the front door into a space that was all clean lines and expensive art, Simone found herself thinking about the contrast. This house was beautiful, but cold. Nothing like the warm, cluttered auto shop where she'd fallen in love with a man who might not even exist. The shop, she said suddenly. Is that who you really are? Or is this? Jin stopped in the middle of his living room, his shoulders sagging. I don't know anymore. I've been playing roles for so long. I'm not sure where the performance ends and the real me begins. Simone walked over to him, reaching up to cup his face in her hands. I know who you are. You're the man who stayed late to fix my car because you knew I couldn't afford to miss work. You're the man who makes kimchi fried rice when he's stressed and sends money to his grandmother. You're the man who kissed me like I was precious. You're also the man who just protected me from danger without hesitation, she continued, who has the resources to keep people safe and the strength to make hard choices. Maybe the question isn't which version is real. Maybe they both are. Jin's eyes searched her face like he was looking for something, doubt, maybe, or fear. Instead, he found determination. You're not running, he said, wonder in his voice. I'm not running, she confirmed, but I need you to promise me something. Anything. No more lies. Whatever happens from here, we face it together, with the truth. Jin pulled her against him, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. I promise. No more lies. Neither of them noticed the figure watching from the shadows across the street, or the camera capturing their embrace. Simone's world shattered at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. She'd been working a double shift at SF General when her phone exploded with notifications. Text after text, missed call after missed call, all from numbers she didn't recognize. When she finally had a moment to check, her blood ran cold. The first message contained a photo of her and Jin embracing outside his Pacific Heights mansion, with the caption, Know who you're sleeping with. The second was a link to a news article with the headline, Heir to Korean crime family spotted with mystery woman. The third was from Jin himself. Don't go home, don't go anywhere alone, I'm coming to get you. But it was the fourth message that made her hands shake so badly she nearly dropped her phone. It was from an unknown number, and it contained a photo of her apartment building with a simple message, We know where you live. Simone locked herself in a supply closet and called Jin with trembling fingers. Where are you? His voice was sharp, professional, nothing like the gentle man she'd fallen in love with. The hospital. Jin, what's happening? There are photos and threats and... Listen to me very carefully. Do not leave the hospital. Do not go anywhere alone. I'm sending someone to get you. You're sending someone? Why aren't you coming? There was a pause that lasted too long. I'm dealing with the situation. What situation, Jin? You promised no more lies. Another pause. The photos were taken by a rival family. They're using you to get to me. Simone's legs gave out, and she slid down the supply closet wall to sit on the floor. Using me how? They want me to choose. The business or you. They think if they threaten you, I'll give up my father's empire to keep you safe. And will you? The silence stretched so long she thought the call had dropped. Jin? Will you? I can't, he said finally, and the words hit her like a physical blow. If I walk away now, there will be a war. Hundreds of people will die. I can't have that blood on my hands. Simone closed her eyes, feeling naive and stupid. So you're choosing the business. I'm choosing to end this the right way, but Simone, I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Before she could answer, someone was pounding on the supply closet door. Simone? Are you in there? It was Dr. Martinez, her supervisor. I have to go, she whispered into the phone. Simone, wait. She hung up and opened the door to find Dr. Martinez looking concerned. There are some men here asking for you. They say they're friends of your boyfriend? Simone's blood ran cold. What do they look like? Asian, expensive suits. They seem intense. These weren't Jin's people. Jin would have called first, would have sent someone she could identify. These were the rival family members, and they'd found her. Dr. Martinez, I need you to call security. Tell them there are dangerous men in the hospital, and then I need you to help me get out of here without them seeing me. To his credit, Dr. Martinez didn't ask questions. 20 minutes later, Simone was slipping out through the hospital's loading dock, wearing scrubs she'd borrowed from a colleague and a surgical cap that hid her distinctive hair. She took 3 different buses, doubling back twice to make sure she wasn't being followed, before finally arriving at the one place she thought might be safe, the auto shop. The lights were off, but Jin's BMW was parked outside. Simone used the spare key he'd given her weeks ago, back when she'd thought he was just a sweet mechanic who trusted her with his business. She found him in the office, hunched over his laptop with his phone pressed to his ear, speaking rapid Korean. When he saw her, he ended the call abruptly. You were supposed to wait for my people, he said, but his voice was relief, not anger. Your people never showed, but the rival family did. Jin's face went white. Are you hurt? Did they... I'm fine. Dr. Martinez helped me get out. Simone sat down across from him, noting the exhaustion in his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. Jin, I need you to tell me the truth, all of it. He was quiet for a long moment, then closed his laptop and leaned back in his chair. My father built his empire on fear and violence. When he died, I inherited not just his businesses but his enemies. The Nakamura family has been trying to move into our territory for years, and my absence from family business has made them bold. Your absence? I've been trying to transition the organization into legitimate businesses, restaurants, import companies, real estate, but change takes time, and not everyone is happy about it. Simone felt a flicker of hope. So you are trying to get out? I'm trying to evolve, but the Nakamuras see any change as weakness. They think if they can force me to choose between you and the business, they can either eliminate me emotionally or take over if I walk away. And you've decided you can't walk away. Jin leaned forward, his eyes intense. I can't walk away because if I do, they'll kill you anyway. The only way to keep you safe is to eliminate the threat entirely. The words hung in the air between them, and Simone felt a chill run down her spine. Eliminate how? The meeting tomorrow night isn't just a gathering, it's going to be a reckoning. Simone stared at him, seeing clearly for the first time the man he really was. Not the gentle mechanic, not even the reluctant crime boss, but someone capable of making decisions that would haunt most people for the rest of their lives. You're going to kill them. I'm going to end a war before it starts. And what about us? What about the man who worried about me eating enough and made me kimchi fried rice? Jin's face cracked, and she saw the pain underneath the resolve. That man was a luxury I couldn't afford. I thought I could be him, thought I could build a life separate from my family's legacy. But the moment I let you into my world, I put you in danger. So this is it. You handle your business, and then what? I disappear. You go back to your life. You finish school, you become the nurse you're meant to be, and you forget about the mechanic who fell in love with you. Simone stood up, anger and heartbreak warring in her chest. You don't get to make that choice for me. I'm trying to protect you. By lying to me again, by deciding what's best for me without asking what I want. Jin stood too, his control finally cracking. What you want doesn't matter. Don't you understand? In my world, caring about someone is a weakness that gets people killed. The moment I fell in love with you, I signed your death warrant. The words echoed in the small office, and Simone saw the truth in his eyes, not just that he loved her, but that he was terrified of what that love would cost. Then maybe, she said quietly, it's time to change your world. Before Jin could respond, the lights went out, and the sound of breaking glass filled the air. Get down, Jin shouted, pulling her behind the desk as gunshots erupted outside. In the darkness, Simone heard Jin speaking Korean into his phone, his voice deadly calm. This was the man she'd fallen in love with, not just the gentle mechanic or the reluctant boss, but someone who could be tender and dangerous in the same breath. As sirens wailed in the distance, she made a decision that would change everything. She wasn't running. The gunfire stopped as suddenly as it had started, leaving only the sound of sirens growing closer, and Jin's voice speaking rapid Korean into his phone. In the darkness behind the desk, Simone could feel the tension radiating from his body as he coordinated what sounded like a military operation. How many? He asked in English, then switched back to Korean for the response. Good. Make sure the police don't find anything they shouldn't. And get me a clean route to the safe house. When he hung up, Simone reached for him in the darkness. Is it over? For now. My security team drove them off, but they'll be back. Jin's hand found hers, squeezing gently. The police will be here soon. I need you to tell them you were visiting me when random gang members started shooting up the neighborhood. Nothing more. Jin, please. Simone, just this once, let me protect you the only way I know how. The next few hours passed in a blur of police questions, witness statements, and Jin playing the role of the concerned business owner whose shop had been caught in crossfire. Simone watched him lie with practiced ease, and realized this was probably not the first time he'd had to clean up violence with careful words and strategic omissions. It was nearly dawn when they finally made it to Jin's safe house, a modest apartment in Chinatown that was the complete opposite of his Pacific Heights mansion. The space was small but comfortable, with traditional Korean decorations and the lingering smell of jasmine tea. We'll be safe here for a while, Jin said, deadbolting the door behind them. My grandmother used to live here before she moved back to Seoul. Simone sank onto the couch, exhaustion hitting her all at once. How long is a while? Until I can end this permanently. The meeting tonight. Jin nodded, his face grim. The Nakamuras crossed a line by bringing violence to my legitimate business. The other families won't stand for that kind of exposure. So you're going to use their mistake against them. I'm going to remind everyone why my father was respected and feared in equal measure. Jin sat down beside her, but there was distance in the gesture. And then you're going to disappear from my life forever. Simone turned to face him fully. What if I don't want to disappear? It's not about what you want anymore, it's about keeping you alive. Stop deciding what's best for me. The words exploded out of her with months of frustration behind them. I'm not some helpless victim who needs you to make choices for her. I'm a grown woman who's perfectly capable of understanding the risks. You don't understand the risks. You can't possibly understand what it means to be involved with someone like me. Then explain it to me. Stop treating me like I'm too fragile to handle the truth. Jin was quiet for a long moment, then stood and walked to the window overlooking the busy street below. My father's first wife was killed by a rival family when I was 15, he said without turning around. They cut her throat and left her body where he would find it, with a note saying that was what happened to the families of men who didn't know their place. Simone felt her breath catch, but she didn't speak. His second wife, my stepmother, lasted 3 years before she couldn't take the constant fear anymore. She left in the middle of the night and never looked back. Smart woman. And your mother died when I was 12, cancer. Jin's voice was flat, emotionless. Maybe she was the lucky one. Jin, do you know what I've been doing for the past 3 years? Trying to build something different. Trying to create a version of this life that doesn't require constant violence and fear. But tonight, I'm going to walk into that meeting and become exactly what my father was, because it's the only way to keep you safe. Simone stood and walked over to him, placing her hand on his shoulder. What if there was another way? There isn't. What if you didn't go alone? Jin spun around, his eyes wide with alarm. Absolutely not. You're not going anywhere near that meeting. Not me. But what if you had allies? People who could help you change things from the inside instead of just perpetuating the cycle. Simone, this isn't a movie. These are real people with real guns who have real reasons to want me dead. I know that. But I also know that you're not your father. You said yourself that you've been trying to build something different. Maybe tonight is your chance to show them what that looks like. Jin stared at her for a long moment, then cupped her face in his hands. How did I get so lucky as to fall in love with someone who believes I can be better than I am? You don't have to be better than you are. You just have to be who you really are. And who is that? Simone smiled, thinking of all the versions of Jin she'd fallen in love with. The gentle mechanic, the protective lover, the reluctant leader trying to change his world. You're the man who fixes things, cars, people, situations that seem impossible. You're the man who sends money to his grandmother and makes kimchi fried rice when he's stressed. You're also the man who has the strength to make hard choices and the resources to protect the people he loves. Jin's thumb brushed across her cheek. I fell in love with you too, Simone, the real you. And you fell in love with the real me, not the boss, not the money, but the man who would do anything to protect you. The words from the title hit Simone like a physical blow, not because they were unexpected, but because they were so perfectly true. So, what happens now? She asked. Now I go to that meeting, and I end this war before it destroys everything I've built. And after? Jin's smile was soft but sad. After, we see if there's a place in my new world for a beautiful nurse who's brave enough to love a man like me. There better be, Simone said, rising on her tiptoes to kiss him, because I'm not going anywhere. The kiss was different this time. Not desperate or afraid, but full of promise and possibility. When they broke apart, Jin rested his forehead against hers. I have to leave soon, he said. I know. If something happens to me, nothing's going to happen to you. But if it does, there's an envelope in the desk drawer with everything you need. Money, new identity papers, contacts who can help you disappear. Simone pulled back to look at him. Jin Park, if you think I'm going to take your money and disappear if something happens to you, then you really don't know me at all. Oh, Simone, no, we're in this together now. Whatever happens, we face it together. Jin stared at her for a long moment, then laughed, a sound of pure joy that transformed his entire face. You're going to be the death of me, Simone Carter. Good thing I'm studying to be a nurse then, I can keep you alive. As Jin prepared to leave for the meeting that would determine their future, Simone made a decision. She pulled out her phone and started making calls of her own. If Jin thought he was facing this alone, he was about to learn just how stubborn a woman in love could be. Years later, Simone would look back on that night as the moment everything changed, not just for her and Jin, but for an entire organization that had been built on fear and violence. The meeting at the Nakamura warehouse had ended not with bloodshed but with negotiation. Jin had walked in with evidence of their attacks on civilian targets, evidence that Simone had helped him gather by coordinating with hospital security cameras and police contacts she'd made during her years working nights in the ER. Faced with exposure that would bring federal attention to all their operations, the other families had made a choice: adapt to Jin's vision of legitimate business or face the consequences of a war they couldn't win. Now, as Simone stood in the garden of their Napa Valley home, watching Jin teach their 3-year-old daughter how to tend the tomato plants, she marveled at how far they'd both come. Appa, why do the plants